Previously on Wentworth. Craven arrived at Wentworth and began his reign of terror. He started by pinning Boomer up against the wall by her throat and then proceeded to break Maxine's arm when she tried to protect Boomer. Craven and Carlton visited Rita, Lou and Joan in the slot, and during a nighttime visit, Carlton raped Lou while Craven held her down. Rita, Lou and Joan decided to do something drastic to get themselves out of the slot, beating themselves up and blaming it on Craven and Carlton. Mr. Jackson told Sandy that he is her father, and the two of them agreed to take things one day at a time. Boomer's appeal is just about to begin and is told by Mr. Jackson that if her appeal is granted, then she will be approved for immediate parole. Craven threatened to kill Chrissy if Janet didn't tell her the truth about killing Zaina and poisoning the women, to which Chrissy was disgusted with. Craven also recorded Janet's confession on a recorder, and Carlton played it to the whole prison through the PA system. The women then chased Janet into H1 where she locked herself in, and Craven ended up attacking Artie from behind and taking Janet to the laundry, where sister Chrissy was also being held with Carlton. Craven then threw Janet into the big industrial laundry dryer, which was then filled with petrol, and Janet was set on fire while inside, where she burnt alive in front of her sister Chrissy. We cut to 1 week later at Wentworth, and the whole prison has been in a complete lockdown since the murder of Officer Janet Latham, and Sister Chrissy has been charged with her murder, with Craven and Carlton telling the police that Chrissy ran away from Carlton and attacked Artie to get to her sister, where she then dragged her sister to the laundry and set her on fire. Chrissy has told the police that it was Craven and Officer Carlton who killed her sister, but the police don't buy his story. However, Mr. Jackson is very concerned that Chrissy might be telling the truth. We cut to Will's office where he is having a meeting with the minister. Will tells him that he is not happy about Craven and Carlton working so closely together, and maybe it would be best if they worked separately for the time being. The minister says that okay, he agrees, if anything to ease tension, and Will says, that's great, minister. If I could just ask one favour, could you please tell Craven your decision, because when I brought this up last week he got very abusive towards me. And the minister has a shocked look on his face and says, okay, Mr. Jackson, if that's what you want. Chrissy has been in the slot over the past week, and Artie comes to get her. He says, come with me, Chrissy, you're going back to H1. Chrissy then walks down the corridor with Artie and sees Craven in the distance having a chat with the minister, and Chrissy has an angry look on her face. They then get back to H1 where Artie lets Chrissy in. Rita and the girls ask Artie when are they being let out of lockdown, and Artie says, it's not up to me, Rita, but from what I hear it could be later on today as long as no one kicks off. Over in H6, and Joan is making a cuppa and asks Lou if she wants one, and Lou says, yeah, go on then, Joni, white with one and a few biscuits while you're at it. Joan then says, do you have a plan for the monster who attacked you last week? And Lou says, yeah, I might have, but there's no way I'm letting you in on it. And Joan says, but I could be some great help to you, Lou. And Lou says, nah, you're alright, Joni, I can handle myself with this one. Back in H1, and Boomer is stressing out and she is still waiting for the outcome of her appeal from last week. Ali tells Boomer, look, calm down, it's not good for you or the little one stressing like this. And Boomer says, yeah, I know, I just wish they would hurry up. Maxine then says, here you are, Booms, a plate of Monte Carlos just for you, and this cheers Boomer up. Craven comes to see Will in his office. So, I hear you've been telling tales to the minister, says Craven, and Will replies saying, Yeah, that's right. I didn't think that you would tell the minister to get fucked. You're so far up his arse you can see his dinner. And Craven says, well, Jackson, just because you are separating me and Carlton on duty doesn't mean that I won't be running this prison how I see fit. And Will says, you carry on, Craven, it's only a matter of time before you trip yourself up. And Craven says, in your dreams, Jackson, don't you think it's been tried by a million other people before you? You've got no chance. And Will says, I've got every chance, Craven. Even if you don't get kicked out of the service, it's only a matter of time before one of the women get to you. And do you know what, Craven? I don't care if you leave Wentworth in the back of a cop car or in a body bag, just as long as you're out of Wentworth. And Craven says, you're dreaming, Jackson. From what I hear, it was your wife who ended up leaving Wentworth in a body bag. Will then takes a big, deep breath, walks around his desk and right up to Craven's face and says, if you've got anything more to say, Craven, say it while we're outside, if you have the balls. Will and Craven then stare into each other's eyes, and Artie then knocks on the door and comes in saying, Margot Gaffney is back, Mr. Jackson. Did you want to see her before I take her to H4? And Will then says, bring her in, Mr. Birdsworth. Mr. Craven here is just leaving. Craven then walks out with a very angry face, and Artie then wheels Margot in on a wheelchair. Will says, so is there any point in me asking you who did this to you? And Margot says, what can I say, Mr. Jackson? I just slipped and fell in the gym. And Will says, you do realise that you're lucky the doctors were able to save your leg. You could have been stuck in that wheelchair for the rest of your life. Now, I want to know who did this to you. And Margot says, I told you, Mr. Jackson, it was an accident. Will then tells Artie to take her back to H4. Over in H1, and Rita and Sandy are talking in Rita's cell. Rita still has the mobile phone that was left under her mattress while she was in the slot. And Sandy has been using it to source a gun with her outside contacts, which they have just managed to get for Rita. But now they need to work out a way to get the gun into Wentworth. Sandy says, maybe we can get one of my contacts to throw it over the wall while we're on exercise yard. And Rita says, nah, that's too risky, we can't risk the gun getting into the wrong hands. And Sandy says, yeah, that's true. Well, the only way around it is if one of my contacts brings it in during a visit, maybe? And Rita says, I don't know, how on earth are they going to get it past the screws? They get body searched on the way in. So Sandy then says, how about this one? I get one of my contacts to stick the gun inside one of the food deliveries, maybe inside chicken or something. And Rita says, that sounds like a better idea, but we need to make sure we have someone on kitchen duty who can pick it up for us. And Sandy says, well, I think I'm due a change of scenery on the work rota. I'll work my magic with Mr. Birdsworth later and see if I can get put on kitchen duty for the rest of the week. And Rita then says, okay, you work your magic, and as soon as you're on kitchen duty, we will ring your contact to make the drop. But we gotta make it quick, this mobile's battery is low. I've turned it off for now, but we probably only have 1 or 2 more phone calls left on this phone. The officers then open up the gates and announce that lockdown is now over, and the women do a massive cheer. Officer Carlton goes to H6 to open the gates. And as Lou and Joan walk past him, he grabs Lou's arm and says, I am very excited for round 2. Lou then shakes his arm off her and says, get fucked, and walks off with Joan. The women then all go to the dining room for breakfast. Margot arrives in the wheelchair and sees Maxine. Margot says, Conway, you're gonna be real sorry for what you did to me. And Maxine says, oh, give it a rest, Gaffney. And Margot says, no, I won't give it a rest. You did this with me with your pack of bitches. And it turns out that it was Officer Latham who poisoned the women. Chrissy looks at Margot and tells her to shut the fuck up. And Margot says, no, I will not shut my mouth. You're all going to pay for what you've done to me. That much I promise you. Maxine then says, "Look Gaffney, you may have not been responsible for the poison, but I gave you enough warnings that you kept breaking, so it would have happened sooner or later anyway. You're a big mouth and a bully, and I don't like you. You needed putting into place." And Margot says, "Oh yeah, well, you just wait, Conway. I'm gonna get you. I'm gonna get all of you. You and all of your little mates." Artie tells Margot to move along and get your food. Then in walks Lou and Joan, and the women start calling out names to both Lou and Joan, calling Joan a freak and Lou a terrorist. Rita then stands up and tells the women that that's enough. Right, I'm only gonna say this once. We all need to stick together if we are going to survive this hell pit with Craven. I want no more infighting. Do you all understand? And Ali says, "Are you serious, Rita?" And Rita says, "Look, I know some of you have got history with Ferguson, serious history, and most of us have still got the scars from Lou's explosive temper tantrums, but from now on we stick together, otherwise we are all going to be picked off one by one." As Rita finishes her speech, in walks Craven and everyone goes silent. Craven walks around the dining room and over to the hot counter. He sees some bacon and picks it up. He then walks over to Chrissy and says, "Oh look Latham, it's a bit of burnt bacon. Reminds you of anything?" Chrissy then starts to shake with temper, and Craven then laughs as he turns his back. Chrissy then jumps up and picks up a chair and slams it into the back of Craven, screaming out that he is a murdering bastard. Artie jumps over and restrains Chrissy, and Craven gets up and grabs Chrissy by the arm, telling her that she is going to be caged. He drags her out of the dining room, and then Artie then radios through to Will, telling him what's happened, and Will storms out of his office. Craven drags a screaming Chrissy down the corridor, and Will arrives asking what the hell is going on, and Craven says that this inmate here just struck me with a dining room chair and I'm taking her to the slot, and Will says, "No, take your hands off her, Craven. I'm taking Chrissy to the infirmary to be checked out. She needs to see a doctor after everything that she's been through," and Craven has a shocked and angry look on his face. Will then gets to the infirmary with Chrissy and says, "What's happened, Chrissy?" And Chrissy says, "The bastard was goading me, Mr. Jackson, taunting my dead sister, and he was the one that fucking killed her." And Will says, okay, Chrissy, look, calm down. I'm not going to send you to the slot. I'm going to call in a psych to check you over, but it probably won't be until tomorrow now, so I want you to stay here overnight where you will be safe." Back in the dining room, and Rita tells the women that she doesn't want anyone doing anything to Craven because she has her own plans to get rid of him. Margot is on the other table and is listening closely, and Maxine says, "What do you have planned, Rita?" And Rita says, "Look, the less you know at the moment, the better, but just for God's sake, don't do anything silly until the time is right, and make sure you all stay in groups of 2 or 3 the whole time." As Will is walking back to his office, Craven stops him in the corridor and says, "What the fuck are you playing at, Jackson? Overruling me, it was a clear case of assault." And Will says, "Yeah, I know, but as you said, Craven, you run the prison how you want it, and I will do it my way." And Will walks off with a smug look on his face. We then cut to the night time, and all the women are asleep in their units. Craven is off duty, but Officer Carlton is, and he heads straight down to H6. He quietly unlocks the gate and sneaks into Lou's cell. Lou is fast asleep, and then Carlton jumps on top of her and pins her down. Lou struggles back, but Carlton gets his baton and presses it down onto Lou's neck as he starts to unzip his trousers. Lou tries to struggle out of it, really does try to struggle, but Carlton is just too strong. And then all of a sudden, Joan appears and smashes Carlton over the back of the head with the kettle and knocks him out cold. Lou then pushes him off her and gets up, but she then kicks him while he's on the ground a few times, calling him a filthy cunt. Joan then looks at Lou and says, "See, I told you I could be of some help." Lou then looks back at Joan and says, Okay then, Joni, let's see what you're made of. Help me get him to the boiler room. The screen then fades to black and Carlton wakes up, strapped and tied to a chair in the boiler room. He looks up and sees Lou Kelly and Joan Ferguson standing over him. Lou says, "Welcome back to the land of the living, Carlton." And Carlton says, "What's going on? Untie me now immediately." Lou then bursts out laughing and says, "Oh, you gotta be joking. I've been waiting for this moment all week, Officer Carlton." And Carlton says, "You're gonna be in so much trouble, both of you." And Joan then says, "Come now, Officer Carlton. You don't really think you're gonna be leaving this hot and sweaty boiler room alive now, do you?" And Lou then says, "That's right, you've messed with the wrong one, Carlton." Lou then tells Joan to gag him, and Lou then pulls out a very sharp blade. And Joan grabs Carlton's hand. Lou then says, "Do you know why they call me Fingers, Mr. Carlton? No? Well, this is why." And Lou then proceeds to cut off Carlton's baby finger, and Joan holds his arm tight and uses her other hand to hide his unbearable screams. Lou then proceeds to cut off his next finger, and then his next finger, before removing all of his fingers from his right hand, including his thumb. Lou then says, "Good luck trying to wank off with that hand now." Lou then bursts out laughing as Carlton continues to cry. Joan then leans up to a crying Carlton's face and says, "Does that hurt, Mr. Carlton? It's just pain, you know. You clearly don't know how to control your actions, which is clearly why you're in this predicament now." Lou then says, "Oh, it's not over yet. Untie his trousers, Joan." And Joan says, "Of course, let me just put on my rubber gloves." And Carlton tries to talk through his gag, muffling, "No, please don't do this, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." And Lou says, "No, you're not sorry, not yet." Joan then proceeds to untie Carlton's trousers and then pulls out his penis, and Lou bursts out laughing and says, "Oh wow, no wonder you've got to rape girls to get your leg over. Nobody would go anywhere near that." Joan then pulls a disgusted look on her face and says, "Oh, you could have had a wash, Mr. Carlton." Lou then tells Joan to hold him down. This is gonna hurt and I don't want him breaking away. So Joan holds him down as Carlton screams out. Lou then pulls the blade down lower and lower, all the way down to his penis, and then slice, slice, slice. Carlton absolutely screams out as Lou completely castrates him. The screen then cuts to black and we then open back up to the boiler room where Carlton is still strapped to the chair but is dead. He has lost an insane amount of blood from the castration. Lou and Joan take his keys and lock the boiler room up and head back to H6 and lock themselves back in. Lou then gives the keys to Joan and tells her to get rid of these before the cell toss tomorrow, and Joan says, "Of course, so do you feel any better now?" And Lou says, "Oh yeah, I feel good. Now, get rid of those keys before the morning." We then cut to the following morning and Craven arrives in the staff room to start his shift. He goes over to his locker and unlocks it, and when he opens it, he discovers a very gruesome discovery. He steps back and drops his bag because he sees a human penis hanging inside his locker and almost vomits. The panic alarm sounds out around the prison as the women all wake up in their units and the officers are all running around with doors slamming and it's total chaos. Boomer says, "What the hell is going on now?" And Rita says, "I don't know, Booms, I just hope the girls are okay." Will receives a call on his radio. "You better come down to the boiler room, Governor." So Will heads straight down and is met with a horrifying discovery with his fellow officers. Carlton is dead in the boiler room, still strapped to the chair, missing fingers and a penis. Craven says, "Jackson, what the hell are you running here? His cock was left in my locker," which can only mean one thing: the women have keys. Will then tells everyone to keep the women locked down and to start an immediate search of the whole prison while I contact the cops. In H1, Rita and Sandy are panicking because the gun is being delivered today with the food delivery. The officers descend to search the units. "What's going on?" says Maxine, and the officers tell all the women to shut it and to remain standing in their cell doors. The officers descend down onto H6, where they also start searching. Artie searches Joan's cell and is horrified by what he finds. He finds the weapon, some gloves covered in blood, and Carlton's keys. Artie can't believe it, and he tells the officers to take Joan to the slot, and then Artie notifies Will that the keys have been found. Will then goes down to the slot to speak to Joan. "What the fuck, Ferguson," says Will, and Joan says, "He raped me, Mr. Jackson, last night, in my unit. I thought the punishment fitted the crime." And Will says, "Oh, Ferguson, there's nothing I can do for you now, you do realise that? You're gonna have to remain in here for the foreseeable." And Joan says, "That's fine, Mr. Jackson. Craven will come for me while I'm in here, and then I can fulfill my purpose." And Will says, "You're fucking crazy, Ferguson." Will then leaves and tells Artie that an officer is to remain guarded outside this cell permanently, and tells the rest of the officers that the lockdown can be lifted and is back to business as usual, and the cops will deal with Ferguson. As the women are let out of their units, Will heads down to get Boomer. "You've got a visitor, Jenkins," says Will. "Who, me?" says Boomer, and Will says, "Yes, Jenkins, come with me." Will then takes Boomer to the visitor's room where Frankie Doyle is waiting for her. Boomer says, "Oh my god, do you have some news?" And Frankie says, "Yes, Booms. It's all over. Your appeal was granted." And Boomer screams out, "Yes!" and then starts to cry as she hugs Frankie. Frankie says, "Look, I'm sorry it took so long, Booms. It was such a complex case, but we managed to swing it in the end." Boomer cries and says, "I can't believe it. This is so ace." And Frankie says, "I heard Mr. Jackson has also sorted out your parole for you. Well, how would you like to come and live with me and Gidge for a while?" And Boomer says, "Really?" And Frankie says, "Yes, Booms. We've spoke about it and we've got heaps of room at our place, and you're going to need an address if they aren't going to let you out." And Boomer says, "Are you sure?" And Frankie says, "Yes. You're going to need loads of support when you first get out. Trust me, I've been there, remember?" And Boomer says, "Oh my god, I can't believe this is really happening." And Frankie says, "Well, believe it, Booms. Now, I need to go and chat with Mr. J just to see if they will be letting you out anytime soon, and we'll just go from there, okay?" And Boomer then gives Frankie another massive hug. Sandy and Ali are in the shower block having a shower next to each other in separate cubicles. Ali says, "So, have you heard anything about your trial date yet?" And Sandy says, "Nah, nothing yet. There's still a huge backlog that they're working through." And Ali says, "Well, at least you've got a bit more support now." And Sandy says, "What do you mean?" And Ali says, "Well, you know, with Mr. Jackson being your dad." And Sandy says, "Shh, don't shout that out, we don't know who's listening." And Ali says, "Oh, sorry, there's nobody in here though but me and you, so don't panic." But unbeknown to Ali, Margot is sitting just outside the shower block and is listening to everything. Margot then wheels herself down the corridor and bumps into Craven and says, "Can I speak to you, Mr. Craven?" Craven turns around and walks up to Margot and says, "What could a cripple slut like you have to say to me?" And Margot says, "I'm not crippled, I'm gonna get out of this wheelchair when I'm better." And Craven says, "Would you like to test that theory, Gaffney?" Margot says, "I wouldn't do that, Mr. Craven. I might be some good use to you." And Craven says, "What use could you be to me?" And Margot replies saying, "Well, I hear that Connors is planning something with the women to get rid of you." And Craven says, "Oh yeah, and what do they have planned?" Margot says, "I don't know yet, but I can keep my ear to the ground for you. All I ask is for some protection." And Craven says, "Well, if you come up with anything good, we will see." And Craven then goes to walk off, but Margot shouts out, "Did you know that Edwards is the governor's daughter?" Craven stops and turns around and says, Bullshit, Gaffney. Margot then says, it's true, Mr. Craven. I just overheard Edwards and Novak talking in the shower block. They are related. Craven then has a smirk on his face and tells Gaffney to get herself to the dining room for breakfast. Sandy heads to the kitchen to do kitchen duty and to wait for the food delivery which has the gun. Rita and the girls are eating in the dining room and Rita tells them that the plan to get rid of Craven will be happening tonight. And Maxine says, so what's the plan, Rita? We want to help you. And Rita says, right, I'm going to be speaking with some of my bikie mates, the Conquerors. They're going to be doing something tonight that's going to make Craven real mad, and I can guarantee he will come straight to the prison tonight and he will come for me, but I am going to be waiting for him. It's going to be suicide, says Ali, but Rita says no, it won't be, trust me, I am well prepared for him. Maxine says, but what about Boomer? She's heavily pregnant and in the unit with us, what if he hurts her? And Rita says, he won't. As soon as we are locked in our units tonight, we're going to make sure that Boomer is barricaded in his cell and he will not be able to get in there. As Rita is talking, Boomer comes running into the dining room with happy tears and announces, I'm gonna be paroled, guys. And the women all cheer, and Ali says, oh my god, so your appeal was granted? And Boomer says, yeah, and I'm gonna go and live with Frankie and Bridget. And Ali says, oh my god, Boomer, this is amazing news. And everyone starts to have happy tears along with Boomer, and all of the women get up in the dining room and give Boomer a massive group hug. Sandy is in the kitchen and the food delivery has just arrived. Sandy starts heaving heavy boxes in and sees the box with the extra hole in. She takes it to the cool room and opens it. She gets the gun that's been hiding inside with the food and puts it in her pocket. Frankie is in Will's office chatting about Boomer's parole, and Will says that Boomer can leave as early as tomorrow morning. The parole board are happy with the arrangements in place, and Frankie says, that's brilliant, Mr. Jackson, thank you so much. Can I come with you to give Boomer the good news? And Will says, of course, let's head off now. Boomer is literally skipping down the halls of Wentworth on cloud 9 and bumps into Lou. And Lou says, hey, watch it there, you nearly took me out then. And Boomer says, oh, shut up, Lou, you ain't gonna spoil my happy day. And Lou says, what are you so happy about? And Boomer says that she's getting paroled. And Lou then says, well, at least there'll be more food for the rest of us now. And Boomer says, oh, fuck off, Lou. Boomer then goes to walk off, but then bumps into Craven just by the stairs. And Craven says, watch where you're going, Jenkins. Boomer then panics and says, I'm sorry, Mr. Craven. Craven then sees Lou and goes over to her and says, I know what you did, Kelly. I know it was you that killed Carlton. Lou then has a smirk on her face and says, I don't know what you're talking about, Craven. Boomer continues to stand by the stairs and is watching what's happening with Craven and Lou. Craven then says, I know Ferguson helped you, but it was you who really did it, wasn't it, Kelly? And Lou says, what's wrong, Craven? Did it freak you out seeing Carlton with a missing cock? Because that's what's coming for you. Craven then attacks Lou and grabs her by the throat, telling her that he is going to kill her. And Boomer then runs over and tries to pull Craven off Lou, but Craven turns around and pushes Boomer, causing Boomer to fall down the flight of stairs. And Boomer hits the bottom and clutches at her stomach and cries out. Lou and Craven are at the top of the stairs, and Lou has a very rare concerned look on her face. She looks up at Craven and says, you bastard. Lou then runs down the stairs and tries to help Boomer. It's okay, Booms, look, it's okay. Frankie and Will then see Boomer on the floor with Lou trying to help her. Frankie bends down to try and help an injured Boomer on the floor, and Will says, what the hell has happened? And Will then spots Craven at the top of the stairs. Boomer cries out, he did it! That bastard up there just pushed me down the stairs. Will radios through for an ambulance to be called immediately and orders Craven to go to his office now and wait for him. Frankie, Will and Lou then continue to help a crying Boomer. Sandy meets Rita in H1 and gives her the gun. Rita says, "That's fantastic, thank you Sandy, I really owe you one." And Sandy says, "Where are you gonna hide it?" And Rita says, "I'm gonna hide it in my cell, but one of us has to stay in the unit at all times to make sure that nobody goes in there before tonight." An ambulance arrives at Wentworth and Boomer is taken in on a stretcher. Frankie goes into the back of the ambulance with her along with Officer Birdsworth. Will tells them to keep him updated of what's happening. The ambulance then leaves and Will goes to his office where Craven is waiting. "Right, Craven," says Will, "I've had enough. I want you out of this prison now. I don't want you in this prison a moment longer." And Craven says, "No. Get fucked, Jackson. I'm not going anywhere. Don't forget now we are both on the governor grade here." And Will says, "Right then, if you won't leave, I'm gonna get the minister in right now and get him to do it." And Craven says, "Good luck with that one." Will then says, "Oh, it will happen, Craven. Do you know why? Because I'm going to tell the minister that I saw you push Boomer down those stairs, and then he's gonna have no choice but to remove you from this prison." And Craven says, "You wouldn't fucking dare." And Will says, "Try me. I've had enough, Craven." And Craven says, "If you do this, Jackson, I will fucking destroy you." And Will says, "Bigger people have tried. Now get the fuck out of my office. I'll let you know as soon as the minister is here." Craven then leaves the office extremely angry. Rita goes to the shower block to make one final phone call on the mobile phone before the battery dies, telling the conquerors that tonight is the night. Burn down his house and destroy everything. Make him cry like a little baby. Make sure that he knows that it was me that sent you to him. And the guy on the other end of the phone says, "Don't worry, Rita, we will make it good for you and Ruby." Rita then hangs up. Sandy is sitting in H1 keeping an eye on Rita's cell, and Craven comes in and tells her to come with him. Sandy says, "I can't, Mr. Craven, not right now, I'm waiting for Rita to get back." And Craven says, "I won't ask you twice, Edwards, come with me immediately." Sandy then reluctantly gets up and goes off with Craven. Craven then takes Sandy to a secluded part of a corridor, and Sandy notices that the security cameras have been turned away, and Sandy says, "What's going on, Craven?" And Craven says, "This is a present from your daddy." Craven then goes up to Sandy and stabs her in the stomach, not once but 4 times as Craven holds her. He then lets her go and Sandy falls to the ground, holding her stomach that's pouring out with blood. She looks up at Craven as Craven has an evil smirk on his face, and he then quickly runs down the corridor. The minister arrives at Wentworth and goes straight to Will's office. "Afternoon, Minister," says Will, and the minister says, "Right, what's this all about, Mr. Jackson? Not more mudslinging, I hope." And Will says, "Oh no, not this time, Minister. If you don't mind though, I would like to go and get Craven so that he can join us. If you stay here, I'll only be a few minutes. My secretary will make some tea for you." Rita gets back to H1 and sees that Sandy isn't there. Rita then panics and runs into her cell to check on the gun, but the gun is gone. Someone has stolen the loaded gun. Lou goes into the infirmary to speak to a nurse, and Lou tells the nurse she thinks she could be pregnant. Will is walking around the prison looking for Craven, but then all of a sudden he sees something in the distance. He sees Sandy laying down in the corridor floor in a pool of blood. Will runs over and screams out, "No!" He bends down and Sandy is still breathing, but she's in a real bad way. The officers hear Will's calls and sound the alarm and call for an ambulance. Sandy opens her eyes and she sees Will's face. Will tells her it's gonna be okay, just hold on, Sandy. And Sandy says, Dad, I love you, Dad." And Will says, no, you're not going anywhere. Stay with me, Sandy, stay with me. And Sandy says, "Craven. It was Craven, Dad. Craven did it." And Will has a shocked look on his face as he cradles Sandy, waiting for help.